Hi, I'm Emily. I'll be your storyteller today. Many of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Also, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now get comfortable. Close your eyes and let the sound of the rain guide you into the story. The first time I heard it, I thought it was just the house settling. A soft creak in the ceiling above the bedroom, like wood stretching against old nails. It was a sound easy to ignore, faint, distant, almost apologetic. I dismissed it the way people dismiss shadows at night, with logic whispered into the silence. But something about the rhythm stayed with me. It didn't sound random. It sounded like steps. They returned the next night. 3 distinct taps, as if someone was walking slowly across the attic floor. I live alone. The attic isn't furnished. There's no access from the outside, no trees near the roof. But still, the noise moved, from one end of the ceiling to the other. Then silence. Then, just as I began to relax, one more step, right above where I lay. It was lighter than a man's footstep, but heavier than a rat's. I told myself it could be pipes, or air pressure, old insulation shifting. I even convinced myself I'd imagined it completely. But the next night, the steps returned, and this time, they paused directly over my bed, long enough for me to hold my breath, long enough to wonder if whatever was up there was listening. Then, a soft scraping sound, like nails on wood. Not loud, just enough to freeze my spine. I bought a flashlight the next day, pulled down the attic ladder and climbed slowly, expecting cobwebs, boxes, dust. But the space was empty, completely bare. No droppings, no tracks. Nothing to suggest movement or life, just stillness. But there was something else. The air was warm, not hot, not stale, just lived in, like someone had been breathing there. I waved the light across the beams. Nothing moved. Still, I backed down quickly. That night, the sound returned. Only this time, I wasn't in bed. I stood in the hallway listening, and when the steps came, they followed my path. I walked to the kitchen, 3 soft creaks above. I paused by the sink. Another step above. It was following me. Not fast, not curious, just copying. I looked up at the ceiling. The plaster above me pulsed slightly, like breath under skin. I called my landlord, told him I was hearing things above the ceiling. He chuckled. Squirrels, probably. They love old beams. I checked. It's clean, I said. He hesitated. You went up there? Yes. Another pause, then softer. Well, just don't disturb anything. Some places, they settle in different ways. He hung up before I could ask what he meant. I set up a recorder in the hallway. Let it run overnight. In the morning, I played it back. At first, silence. Then soft steps. A whisper. Static. Then a voice that made my breath catch. She's still awake. I replayed it 3 times. Always the same. No distortion. My voice. But I hadn't said anything, and I certainly hadn't whispered it from the attic. The next night, I slept in the living room. At 2:16 a.m., the steps moved directly above me again. I didn't move, didn't speak, I just listened. The movement stopped, and then came a numb, slow dragging noise, like something being pulled across wood. Then, laughter. Short, sharp, familiar. I covered my ears. When I uncovered them, the room was silent. But I no longer felt alone. I left a piece of paper at the attic opening. Just a note that said, "Who are you?" In the morning, the note was gone. In its place, a single object. My favorite pen, missing for weeks, resting perfectly centered on the folded ladder. That day, I couldn't concentrate. Every reflection felt off. Every silence felt full. I stopped speaking aloud, but inside my head, I began to ask the same question again and again. Is someone living above me? It started the next morning. I was brushing my teeth, staring at my reflection like always. Nothing unusual. Until I lowered my hand and noticed that the image didn't follow immediately. There was a delay, a fraction of a second. Barely, enough to notice. But there. My eyes moved, and hers moved after. I blinked. She blinked. Late. My stomach dropped. I told myself I was tired, that maybe I'd leaned forward at a weird angle. I wiped the mirror, cleaned it with both hands, stepped back, then forward again. But the same thing happened. Small delays, subtle lags, and something about the way her head tilted. It looked like she was the one watching me. Not mirroring. Studying. I turned away quickly. But as I left the bathroom, I caught it. Just in the corner of my eye. My reflection still standing. Still watching. Still smiling faintly. When I turned back, the mirror was normal again. My pulse raced in my ears. I opened and closed the cabinet door several times. Each time, I paid attention. Nothing wrong. Nothing visible. But something had shifted. Throughout the day, I kept testing reflections. The kitchen window, the microwave door, the black screen of the TV. At least once in each of them I saw something linger. Like the image of me wanted to stay just a second longer. As if being pulled back by a delay I couldn't control. It wasn't all the time, but often enough to stop me from calling it a trick of the eye. I recorded myself. Sat in front of the bathroom mirror with my phone and just stared. Nothing strange happened for the first minute. But in the recording, around the 90-second mark, there was a flicker. My head tilted slightly in the reflection, but I hadn't moved. I replayed it frame by frame. Her eyes opened wider while mine stayed still. Then it caught up. Synced again. I tried again that night. Lights off. Flashlight on the sink. I wanted to provoke whatever was happening, to force it into revealing itself. I looked straight into the mirror and whispered, "What do you want?" There was no answer, but a faint breath fogged the glass. And it didn't come from me. The air was still. My lips hadn't moved, but the fog remained. A smudge in the shape of a half smile. I grabbed a marker and circled the spot on the mirror. In the morning, it was gone. No trace, but something had been added. Just beneath the edge of the frame, scratched into the metal with a pin or nail. 5 words. Your side is the copy. My knees buckled slightly. I turned off the light and left the room. Closed the door. Locked it. then sat on the hallway floor and cried without sound. That afternoon, I visited the antique store down the road. I asked if they had any old mirrors. The woman behind the counter smiled and said, "It's better not to replace them." "Why not?" I asked. "They hold your shape too long," she said. I didn't buy anything. But when I left, I noticed my reflection in the store window, standing completely still as I walked away. Back home, I covered the mirror with a towel, told myself it was temporary, just for peace of mind. But that night, I dreamt of it. I was trapped inside, watching her brush my hair, wear my clothes, live my routine. And when I pounded on the glass to escape, she turned and smiled. With my exact smile, only wider. I woke up sweating. Towel had fallen. The mirror was bare. And in the center of the fogged glass, as if freshly breathed upon, a single fingerprint pressed into the mist, pointed downward, toward me. It began with the dreams. Fragmented scenes of standing at the foot of my own bed, watching myself sleep. I couldn't move in the dream. I just stood there, unmoving, as I watched my chest rise and fall. The room felt colder than normal, my breaths visible in the air like fog. Every time I tried to blink, the scene remained locked, as though the act of watching had become more important than dreaming. When I woke, my bedroom door was ajar. I always close it. Always. I live alone. No pets. No wind. I sat up slowly, scanning the room. Everything seemed in place. But the air felt wrong, disturbed, unsettled, like someone had just exhaled over every surface. I walked to the door, touched the handle. It was warm. Not neutral. Not room temperature. Warm. I set up my phone on the nightstand that night. Camera pointed at the bed, just in case. I didn't expect to see anything, but in the morning, the video was gone. The camera had stopped recording after 2 minutes. The file was corrupted. Only a few seconds were visible. My sleeping form and, just at the edge of the frame, a figure in the hallway. Not moving, not entering, just watching. I replayed those, seconds over and over, paused, brightened the image. The figure looked like me. Same shape, same posture. But the outline was off. Her head slightly tilted, arms too still, body too symmetrical. Like she wasn't bound by breath or fatigue. Just presence. I closed the laptop and walked to the hallway. The spot in the video was empty, but I could feel the cold. The next night, I barely slept. Every creak in the floor, every shift in the walls made me jolt upright. At 3:41 a.m., I opened my eyes suddenly. Something had changed. The room was darker than usual, though the blinds were open. I looked toward the closet. The door was cracked, just enough to suggest it had been opened gently. My heart raced. I hadn't touched it in days. I walked toward the closet with slow, deliberate steps. Reached for the doorknob. It swung open easily. Nothing inside but clothes. Still, the feeling of being watched didn't fade. It grew stronger. I turned on every light, sat in the living room until morning. But no matter where I moved, I felt her eyes on me, my own, somehow removed from my body and placed above, observing. On the fourth night, I dreamed again. This time, I stood beside the bed while the other me slept. Her breathing was even, peaceful. I reached forward in the dream, not to wake her, but to touch her hair. And when my hand made contact, she opened her eyes. They were my eyes, but brighter. And she whispered, "Almost ready." I woke screaming, drenched in sweat, lungs tight with dread. I started locking the bedroom door, placing a chair under the handle, sleeping with a flashlight in one hand and my phone in the other. But it didn't matter. Every morning, the door was unlocked. The chair moved slightly. And one time, the flashlight was gone completely. I found it in the attic the next day, placed neatly atop a folded blanket I didn't own. Neighbors started acting strange. Mrs. Leary next door asked me, "Did you sleep well last night?" I nodded, unsure. She smiled. "You looked so peaceful from your window." I frowned. My blinds had been shut. She tilted her head. "Maybe I imagined it." Then she walked away, humming the tune I'd dreamt of the night before. That evening, I covered every inch of my bedroom with paper, notes, scribbles, instructions to myself. I wanted proof of continuity. If something changed overnight, I'd see it. I took photos, recorded videos. But when I woke, most were gone. And in the one place of one note in handwriting identical to mine was a single sentence: "You sleep better when I'm near." It started with my toothbrush. The handle was smoother, the bristles softer. I chalked it up to forgetfulness. Maybe I'd replaced it and forgotten. But 2 days later, my pillow felt wrong. Flatter. No smell of my shampoo. Just a faint floral scent I'd never used. When I checked the tag, it had no brand. Just a word stitched in gray thread: comfort. I checked the sheets. They weren't mine. Slightly different pattern. Same color, but the stitching was too precise. I searched the closet. Some of my clothes were missing, replaced by nearly identical versions. A red sweater I never bought. A pair of shoes one size too big. And in the corner of the top shelf, a coat I hadn't seen in years. One I donated after college. I called a friend to ask if she remembered the coat. She paused, then said, "You've always had that coat." "No," I insisted. "I gave it away." She laughed awkwardly. "Maybe you replaced it. You do that sometimes." But I don't. I'm meticulous. I remember every item I've ever owned. The changes weren't subtle anymore. They were intentional. A replacement process in progress. One morning, I found my bookshelf rearranged. Not alphabetically, not thematically, just wrong. Books I never purchased. Titles I didn't recognize. But when I flipped through them, some passages were underlined, in my handwriting. One book had a folded note that read, "You liked this one better." I don't know who wrote it, but I didn't disagree. And that terrified me. I opened a photo album. Images had changed. My parents were the same, but I looked older. In one, I wore a dress I didn't own. In another, I was with a dog I've never seen before, smiling. The timestamps remained. Same dates, same events, but altered. Shifted just slightly to cast doubt on my memories. And I realized something horrible. I couldn't prove which version was real. I went to the kitchen and opened the drawer where I keep spare keys. The ring was gone, replaced by a single key with no markings. When I tried it on the front door, it didn't fit. Not exactly. I had to turn it twice. It clicked reluctantly, like it was relearning me. I placed it back and marked it with nail polish. That night, the polish was gone, and the key was warm. The replacements weren't upgrades. They weren't degradations either. They were corrections. Someone, or something, was refining my environment to match a version of me I hadn't become yet. Like it was building a better version of my life. One where I never made mistakes. One where everything fit just a little too perfectly. One where the copy could step in seamlessly. My phone's wallpaper changed. Same photo. But I was smiling wider. My eyes were brighter. I asked a friend if she noticed. She said, "That's the picture you always use." "No, I cropped it." "You didn't," she insisted. When I checked my backups, the old version was gone. My cloud account had been wiped clean, as if the past I remembered had been archived elsewhere, and I no longer had clearance. It happened in the hallway. I was passing by the attic door when I heard it. My voice. Calm, steady, soft, not echoing, not distant. Clear, as if someone were standing directly behind the ceiling. I froze mid-step, straining to hear. She whispered, "Turn off the lights." I didn't move. A beat of silence followed. Then again, quieter. I don't like being watched. I slowly backed away, staring at the ceiling. The sound didn't come again. The attic door remained shut. I hadn't pulled down the ladder in weeks. I stood beneath the hatch, heart racing. My own voice shouldn't make me feel like prey, but it did. I turned off the hallway light as she asked. The air grew colder, and behind me, the floor creaked once, as if someone stepped backward. That night, I kept all the lights on, every bulb in the house. I sat in the living room with the television playing static, just to mask the silence. But around 2 a.m., I heard her again, from the kitchen this time. Just 3 words. "Please stop hiding." The faucet turned on briefly. When I entered the room, no one was there, but a single glass sat on the counter, filled, warm. I recorded the house for hours. Set up my phone in each room, caught nothing but faint static, shifting occasionally into frequencies that felt almost like words. One recording stood out, my voice humming a song I hadn't sung in years. The tune was slightly off, slower, but still mine. A childhood lullaby, one I hadn't remembered until she sang it. I tried speaking to her, whispered into the air. "Who are you?" Silence. "What do you want?" Silence again. But then, behind the mirror, came a faint murmur. My name, drawn out, like breath through teeth. You. Not a demand, not a threat, just identification. Recognition. As if she was answering a question I hadn't realized I'd asked. Over the next days, her voice became more frequent. Always mine. Sometimes playful. Sometimes quiet and sad. I heard her humming in the bathroom. Reading aloud in the attic. Once, she finished a sentence I started out loud. Perfectly synchronized. As though we shared the same thoughts. Only I wasn't thinking what she said. I was about to. She started responding to my questions before I finished them. I'd wonder where my sweater had gone, and she'd whisper, "It's in the attic." I'd ask myself why I felt so tired, and she'd murmur, "Because I'm waking up." I kept denying it. telling myself it was stress, paranoia, fatigue. But the truth was becoming harder to ignore. She was present. She was listening. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating much. I walked the house at night, trying to catch her in the act. She never showed herself, only spoke when I least expected, when I let my guard down. Once, as I dozed off on the couch, I heard her beside my ear. "It's almost time." I sat up, gasping. No one there. Just my own breath and the low hum of the refrigerator. The sound woke me around 3:12 a.m. A soft thump, followed by a slow wooden creak overhead. I lay perfectly still, listening as something shifted above me. Then came the unmistakable sound of the attic ladder descending. Not crashing, not sudden, just a deliberate, controlled slide of metal against frame. The door hadn't opened itself before. This was new. This was permission. I crept out of bed, careful not to let the floorboards betray me. The hallway light flickered as I approached. The attic door now hung open like a mouth mid-sentence, the ladder fully extended. At the top, only darkness. No motion. No sound. But the air smelled different. Not musty or stale, but warm. Lived in. I whispered up. "Hello?" The silence that followed was too intentional. I debated climbing. Something inside me urged movement, like a thread was tugging from above. But I didn't go. Instead, I stood at the bottom step and placed my hand on the cold metal rung. The chill shot up my arm. Before I could move again, the ladder retracted on its own. Quick, smooth. And the door slammed shut with a quiet finality that sounded far too practiced. I ran to the window, hoping to see someone. A figure on the roof. A silhouette in the dark. But there was no wind, no movement outside. Only stillness. I turned back to the ceiling and whispered, "Why now?" My voice didn't echo. It vanished, swallowed by something above. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I stayed in the hallway until sunrise, watching the ceiling, waiting for it to breathe again. The next morning, the ladder was extended once more. I hadn't heard it open. It was just down, as if it had always been that way, as if someone else had come down while I was asleep. I didn't climb it. I didn't touch it. I simply backed away, one step at a time, until I was in the kitchen, and then locked the basement door. Not because I thought she was down there, but because it was the only door I could lock. Later that day, I found footprints on the hallway floor. Bare, faint, but clearly human. They led from the base of the ladder to the bathroom. I followed them carefully. Inside, I found the mirror fogged from within, even though no one had showered. Written in the fog with a finger, "Come up." The edges were still fresh. I wiped it away. It reappeared an hour later. I installed a motion sensor camera at the base of the attic. That night, it recorded 10 seconds of footage. The door opening slowly, the ladder unfolding. No one visible. But in frame 173, a shadow passed across the floor, fast, low, human-shaped. No footsteps, no breathing, just motion. Then, at the end, the ladder folded back without sound, and the camera shut off by itself. My therapist told me to trust my senses, to ground myself with reality. But how do I do that when the house responds to questions I haven't asked? When the attic rearranges itself in silence? I went to her office the next day and found a different receptionist. When I asked for my appointment, she said, "You canceled last week." I hadn't. I never made that call. She showed me the voicemail. It was my voice. That night I stood under the attic door again, waited, watched. At 3:27 a.m. it opened. The ladder slid down, slowly, like clockwork. And I swore I heard breathing. Not mine, not labored, calm, close, right above the ceiling, as though someone was leaning down just out of sight. I whispered, "What do you want?" Air didn't shift, but a quiet reply came from the darkness. "You." It started subtly, small coincidences that I tried to dismiss. I'd think about rearranging the books in the living room, and later that day, I'd find them moved. Not drastically, just slightly, my planned order executed without effort. Once I imagined eating soup for dinner, and when I opened the fridge, a fresh container was there. I hadn't bought it. I hadn't even left the house. At first, I thought I was losing time, that maybe I was acting on thoughts and forgetting them instantly. But then the thoughts became more abstract, not plans, just fleeting ideas. I'd wonder how a certain song would sound on piano, and minutes later, it would play softly from the attic above. My head would fill with questions, and the answers would arrive in handwriting I didn't remember writing. I found a note on the bathroom mirror one morning. "You're wondering if you're still the real one. You are, for now." I hadn't spoken the question aloud. I hadn't even fully formed the thought. But she had known. I left the note there for days, watching the ink fade. Eventually the glass cleaned itself, and in its place, a single word reappeared. Sinking. When I tried to block her out, I failed. Meditation made her louder. Music invited her rhythm. Even silence was filled with her hum, a tone beneath the walls that pulsed in time with my heartbeat. She didn't need to listen. She was inside. Not physically, not yet. But mentally, her presence filled every corner of my thinking. I no longer felt alone in my head. One morning I sat at the table and began writing in my journal. Before I could finish the sentence, I noticed the next page was already written. Same pen, same handwriting, same exact words I had just begun. I checked the timestamp. The ink was dry. She was ahead of me now, predicting. Or worse, scripting. Like I was following a path already walked. I threw the journal into the fireplace, watched it burn. But later that night, it was back on my nightstand, intact, still warm. The cover slightly warped as if it had remembered the fire. I flipped through it, and there were new entries, ones I hadn't written. One said, "Don't fight the echo. She's only trying to help." I underlined the word, help. It bled red through the page. I tested her, thought of a number. 7. Then asked aloud, "What number am I thinking of?" Silence. Then a soft knock from the attic. 7 times. Slow, precise, deliberate. I tried again the next day. 12. She whispered it through the vents that night while I slept. My dreams were filled with clocks and spinning dials. When I woke, the oven timer was set for 12 minutes. I hadn't touched it. At the store, I reached for a bottle of water. Behind it, A sticky note stuck to the shelf. Yes, that's the one you wanted. I asked the cashier if she saw who left it. She blinked, confused. No one comes in before you, she said. My receipt had no timestamp, just a barcode that, when scanned, printed a message. She remembers before you do. The walls began whispering 3 nights after I stopped speaking out loud. It was subtle at first, static under the plaster, like a radio just out of tune. I pressed my ear to the hallway and heard the faint trace of humming. My voice, slower, echoing. She was no longer waiting in the attic. She was moving through the bones of the house, and the house was letting her speak. I followed the sound to the bathroom where it grew louder near the vent. I placed my palm against the tiles, and they were warm. The humming stopped, replaced by a sentence. You don't have to be scared. Her voice was closer than ever, not distorted, smooth, gentle. But hearing your own voice come from inside, the wall isn't comforting. It's a quiet threat wearing a soft disguise. I tore the vent open. Nothing inside. No speaker, no wire. Just blackness and a faint trace of breath. I whispered, "Why now?" The reply was immediate. "Because you're listening." My knees weakened. I staggered back, shutting the door. Her voice didn't stop. It followed, now in the hallway baseboard, beneath the window frame, vibrating inside the stairs. Each room spoke differently. In the kitchen, she was playful. "You always leave the light on." In the bedroom, she sounded mournful. "I miss what you used to be." In the living room, she asked questions I hadn't asked myself in years. "Do you still wish you'd left?" I turned on the TV for noise. It buzzed for a second. Then her voice came through the speakers. "We don't need static between us." I smashed the remote, yanked the plugs from every outlet. But her voice didn't stop. That night, I sat on the floor, hands over my ears, but it echoed through my chest, a vibration behind the ribs. I realized she wasn't using wires or vents or speakers. She was speaking through the house itself. The walls weren't just shelter. They were conduits. They were listening tools. I screamed into the silence. "What do you want from me?" She replied instantly, "I want to help you become." "Become what?" "Whole," I cried. Not out of fear, but exhaustion. The voice paused, then softer. "You don't have to carry everything alone anymore." And for a second, I almost believed her. I found a note tucked under my pillow. "When you're ready, I'll be everywhere." The ink was warm to the touch. I buried it in the trash. The next morning it was back, folded into my toothbrush holder, pristine. I didn't open it again, but all day, her voice said nothing. That silence was worse than her words. It felt like being abandoned by your own reflection. That night, the house creaked with more intention. The ceiling fan turned without power. The fridge opened slightly on its own. Every surface held tension, like breath held too long. I waited in bed, refusing to speak. Around 2:54 a.m., her voice came from inside the mattress springs. "You still don't trust me." I bit my lip and whispered, "Should I?" Her answer echoed through the lamp base. "You already did." It began with the wallpaper in the hallway. I'd walked past that wall every day for years. It was pale blue with a faint floral pattern. But one morning, it was different. No flowers, just solid ivory. I touched it, thinking I'd lost my mind. But the surface was fresh. Not just painted over, replaced. No smell, no trace of the old design, like it had never existed. I checked my photos. The hallway was always solid ivory. Every image had changed, even the printed ones in old albums. Not even Photoshop could explain this. My hand trembled as I touched the wall again. It was warm, pulsing gently, like a heartbeat under plaster. She hadn't just altered the memory. She had rewritten the structure, bent it around her version of what should be. Furniture began to shift. Couch moved 2 inches forward each night. The kitchen chairs reversed positions. My favorite mug went missing and was replaced with one that said, "Grateful." I never owned that mug. I never would have bought it. I stared at it for 10 minutes before putting it away. The next morning it was back in my hand, full of coffee, and still warm. The bookshelves were next. My organization system was gone. Instead, every book was placed by color, not title. The effect was beautiful, unnatural. A visual code I hadn't built. Aesthetics I didn't agree with, but couldn't stop staring at. I pulled one book out at random. Inside, a note tucked between the pages. Order can feel like safety, even when it's not yours. Doors began leading to the wrong rooms. I opened the closet in the hallway and found the bathroom inside. I shut it quickly, opened it again, and it was the linen closet like always. But sometimes I could feel the air behind a door change before I touched it, as if she was deciding what I needed access to. And sometimes she said it plainly. Not yet. I placed sticky notes around the house to prove what was real. Markers, anchors. But each time I returned, to them the handwriting had changed. The notes remained in the same color, the same spot, but the phrasing altered. Where I'd written, "Don't trust the bedroom," she rewrote, "You are safe where you rest." I left one message that simply said, "Mine." The next day, it read, "Ours." Photographs changed next. Frames I'd never bought appeared on the shelves. My face was in every one, but the expressions were unfamiliar. Brighter, lighter, as if I were happier here. In one photo, I stood in a garden I didn't recognize, holding hands with someone whose face was blurred. My name was written on the back, but not in my handwriting. The bathroom mirror no longer fogged with steam. Instead, it revealed hidden writing each time the shower ran. Phrases like, "Breathe slower," or, "You are adjusting." The messages faded before I could photograph them. Once I wrote back, "What are you doing to this house?" That night, the tiles rearranged themselves. A small gap appeared under the sink. Inside it, a folded map, but the house layout had changed. It happened at the grocery store. I walked in just before noon, the usual quiet hum of a Tuesday. The cashier looked up and smiled warmly. "Back so soon?" she asked. I froze. "I haven't been here in a week," I said. Her smile faded, slightly. "You bought bread this morning." I stared at the receipt in her hand. My name was printed across the top. I left without buying anything. On the sidewalk outside, someone waved at me from across the street. A man I didn't recognize. "You dropped this," he said, holding out a scarf. I didn't own a scarf, but when I touched it, it smelled like my shampoo. My initials were embroidered at the corner in my own handwriting. I backed away. He looked confused, like I was the stranger. At home, I found a delivery at the door, a package addressed to me. Inside was a dress, my size, my style. I hadn't ordered it, but inside the box was a note that read, "Loved seeing you today. You looked beautiful." No signature, no return address. I checked my email for recent orders. Nothing. But my browser history had a tab open to that exact dress, marked as purchased. I opened my laptop camera to check my face. Same as always, or so I thought. But something in my expression looked rehearsed, too symmetrical. The way I blinked, on time, never staggered. Like I was remembering how to be human, one muscle group at a time. I tried frowning, and my reflection smiled, just briefly, then reset. I slammed the lid shut. The neighbor's kid waved at me as I took out the trash. "I saw you with the puppy," he said. "What puppy?" "The one in your arms, outside my window." "When?" "This morning," he said. "You waved at me, remember?" I didn't, but I nodded anyway. He grinned and ran off. That night, I reviewed footage from my porch camera. At 7:48 a.m., someone exited my house. She wore my coat, walked like me, looked straight into the camera, but her eyes were colder, clearer, not tired, not clouded with doubt. She waved, and then walked away. I paused the frame and zoomed in. My face, my skin, my smile, but the version I'd forgotten how to wear. I sent the footage to my own email, just to have a backup. It disappeared within seconds. I tried again. Gone. I uploaded it to the cloud. Corrupted. Each time the file vanished faster. It was like she knew where I was saving it. Like she'd already erased this version before. When I checked my phone, it had a notification from an app I didn't download. Appearance synced successfully. The next day, a woman I barely knew touched my arm. "You're glowing," she said. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled back. "Thanks." She leaned in. "You were always meant for this place." I didn't reply, just watched her walk away. My skin still tingled where she touched me, like recognition had passed between them. Not to me, to her. I texted Sarah that afternoon, an old friend I hadn't seen in weeks. I asked if she wanted to meet for coffee. Her reply was brief. "Already saw you this morning." I stared at the message for a long time, rereading it as if the meaning might shift. I hadn't left the house. I hadn't spoken to Sarah in days. When I called her, she didn't answer. When I rang again, the line was disconnected. I checked her social media. There was a photo of us posted hours earlier. The caption read, "Always a joy seeing her. Same smile, better spirit." It was my face, same eyes, same sweater I hadn't worn in months. But I remembered that photo being taken 2 years ago, on a trip she and I took before we stopped talking. The date had changed, The background, too. It looked like it was taken that morning. I called my mother. Her voice trembled when she answered. "Hi," I said. Silence. Then, "Who is this?" "It's me." A pause. "I already talked to you today," she whispered. "Why are you calling again?" I hung up without speaking. Emails bounced back. My passwords no longer worked. Even my handwriting began to feel foreign. I wrote my name on a piece of paper and stared at it. It didn't look right. The letters were slanted differently, more precise, sharper, like someone was writing my name for me. I traced over it again and again until the page tore. When I blinked, it had already been replaced. I ran into an old co-worker at the pharmacy. She tilted her head and squinted. "Sorry, have we met?" "We worked together for 3 years," I said. Her smile froze. "Oh. Right." But I saw the lie behind her eyes. I asked her what she remembered about me. She said, "You were quiet. The other one, she had presence." I left without filling my prescription. I wasn't sure which name to give anymore. The barista at my usual cafe spelled my name wrong on the cup. I corrected him. He smiled. "That's how you asked me to write it yesterday." "I wasn't here yesterday." He laughed gently as if I'd told a joke. "You were. You ordered the same drink." Then he handed me the cup, my name. But it didn't feel like mine. I looked at myself in the mirror that night, stared for what felt like hours. The lines on my face were familiar, but something underneath had shifted. I smiled. My reflection didn't. I blinked. She blinked late, then fast, like catching up to a script she hadn't memorized completely. I reached forward. So did she. But her fingers stopped half an inch too soon. I found a new note under my pillow. "They know who they prefer." It was in my handwriting. Same pen I kept on the nightstand. I hadn't written it, but the phrasing, it echoed something I'd said years ago. Something I'd only ever thought. The handwriting felt more like mine than mine did. I folded the paper and placed it in the drawer. The next day it was gone. The door didn't open when I turned the knob. I had to jiggle it, twist it harder, push with my shoulder. It finally gave, but slowly, reluctantly, like the frame didn't recognize me anymore. I'd lived here for 6 years. Never once had that door stuck. I stood in the entryway for a long time, unsure if I should call it home, or if I was already trespassing in my own life. The kitchen lights no longer turned on when I entered. I waved my hand under the motion sensor. Nothing. I clapped. Still nothing. I flipped the switch manually, and the bulb flickered, then went dark. I replaced it 3 times. Each time, it burned out. But when I passed by an hour later, the light was glowing softly. I hadn't touched it. But someone else had been through. I stood in front of the thermostat and tried adjusting the temperature. The screen flashed red. A warning I'd never seen before. User not recognized. I touched it again. Nothing happened. Later that night, I passed by it and saw it adjusting automatically, shifting to a degree I hadn't chosen. It paused for a moment before locking. My fingerprints were no longer welcome. The bedroom window that once opened with ease was now stuck. I pulled harder, and it resisted. When I finally forced it up, an alarm sounded, faint, like a chime from another room. I didn't have any alarms set. I walked the house, checking every corner. Nothing triggered. But something had logged the event. I could feel the walls remembering the breach. The voice assistant no longer answered me. I said, "Lights on." Silence. "What's the weather?" Nothing. Then, after a long pause, the screen displayed a message in pale gray letters. Voice pattern not authorized. I tried again, this time louder. It responded, "Already answered." But I hadn't heard anything. Later, I found the assistant playing music softly, a playlist I'd never made. I sat on the couch, remote in hand, pressed power. Nothing. I changed the batteries, still dead. But as I stood to leave, the TV turned on by itself. A paused frame, my face from behind. A shot of me walking down the hallway, filmed from above. I blinked, and the image disappeared, replaced by the news. Volume low, almost apologetic. The faucet ran on its own. Not always, just when I was near. It would trickle when I passed by, then shut off the moment I turned my head. I tried turning the main valve, but it no longer budged. The tools were gone from the drawer. I checked the basement. The stairs groaned with unfamiliar weight, as if someone had walked down just seconds before I arrived. I knocked on the bathroom mirror, half joking. "Are you the one in charge now?" The lights flickered twice. I waited, heart pounding. "If you can hear me," I whispered. "Give me a sign." The sink faucet sputtered. A single droplet landed on my wrist. The mirror fogged slightly, revealing a single word beneath the glass. "She." I walked past the hallway mirror without looking, as I had been doing for weeks. But something caught the edge of my vision, a shift in light, or maybe movement. I turned back slowly. My reflection was still. My body, my clothes, but my face. My face was smiling. I wasn't. I stood motionless, expression flat. Yet the reflection held a faint, satisfied curve at the corners of its mouth. I stepped closer. My reflection did the same, perfectly timed. The smile faded as I neared. I leaned in. So did she. I raised my right hand. Hers rose in sync. For a moment, everything seemed normal again. Then I blinked. She didn't. I blinked again. Nothing. She stared back, eyes wide, smile just starting to form again. I backed away fast. Later, I tried again. Stared for minutes. The reflection held. Then I whispered, "What do you want from me?" My mouth moved. Hers didn't. She kept staring. The silence felt deep, charged. I turned off the lights, hoping to shut her out. In the dark, the glass glowed faintly, and within the reflection, her face emerged clearer. Not mine anymore. Not entirely. I started covering every mirror in the house. Towels, blankets, taped cardboard. But each morning, the covers were gone, folded neatly in the laundry basket, and the mirrors, spotless, wiped clean, framed with strange symbols drawn in the condensation. Circles with eyes, spirals that turned inward, arrows that bent back toward the center. I washed them away. They always came back. One night, I caught her watching me from the bathroom mirror. I hadn't even entered yet. I turned the corner and saw her face already in place, waiting. Chin tilted slightly, eyes narrowed like she was studying me. I stepped in slowly. She tilted her head. I didn't. She blinked first. I whispered, "Why are you doing this?" She answered, her mouth moving slowly, soundless. But I understood. The word, belong. I placed a camera in front of the mirror, recorded for hours, watched the footage back. For the first hour, everything mirrored perfectly. Then at timestamp 01:04:27, she paused. I leaned down in the footage to tie my shoe. She didn't. She just stood there, watching. A full 3 seconds of unsynced stillness. Then, when I stood, she smiled and nodded. Just once. I showed the footage to a tech specialist. He said there was nothing wrong with the recording. Maybe the mirror caught a glitch in your lighting. I asked him what kind of lighting causes a person's reflection to act on its own. He looked at me strangely. Maybe it wasn't your reflection. I laughed, but it sounded forced. He didn't laugh at all. I returned home to find my bedroom mirror uncovered. I had sealed it with masking tape and a black sheet. It was gone. Not torn, just gone. The mirror was pristine. Centered at the top was a lipstick message in cursive. "You looked happier today." I hadn't worn lipstick in months, but the shade was one I used to love, the one I threw out last winter. It started during a phone call. I was leaving a voicemail for my sister. Something routine, something short. As I spoke, I heard myself stutter. Not because I meant to, but because the words left my mouth in a different cadence. My tone was softer, slightly higher, a lilt at the end of my sentences I'd never used. I finished the call and played it back. The voice was mine, but not mine. The second time I was talking to a cashier. I asked for change, but as I spoke I heard it again. That smoothness, that foreign rhythm. Like someone else was shaping the words as they left my throat. The cashier smiled too widely and said, "You sound like her." I asked who. "The one who came in earlier," he said. "Your sister?" "I don't have a sister. Not anymore." I began testing myself, reading aloud into a recorder. Short phrases, poetry I'd memorized. The playback always sounded different, familiar yet emotionally detached, as if the meaning had drained out. One morning, the playback whispered something I hadn't said. "I'm almost finished." I rewound 3 times. It was there every time, inserted into the middle of a breath. My voice, but not my breath. Singing became impossible. I used to hum while washing dishes, but now the melody broke into something unrecognizable. Notes bent, flattened. The tune reversed itself in my mouth. I tried to sing something cheerful. It came out sad. I tried whispering a prayer. My throat closed up halfway through. And in the silence that followed, the house answered with a hum of its own. Woke up one morning hoarse. My voice cracked on every word. But later that day, a friend told me, "You sound great on that podcast." I'd never been on a podcast. She played it for me, and there it was. My voice, steady and clear, discussing architecture and light theory, things I've never studied. I asked her for the link. It vanished from her phone while we talked. When I spoke to the mirror, it answered. I mouthed the words, "What do you want from me?" And the reflection said them aloud. I didn't move my lips. It was her voice now. Not just using my tone, it was adapting. She spoke like someone who had worn my throat long enough to master its every weakness. Her accent was more neutral, her phrasing more deliberate, like a cleaner version of me. I heard her voice in other places too, through strangers. A man at the post office turned and repeated a thought I'd had seconds before. A woman in line behind me said something I swore I'd whispered only in my mind. It wasn't mimicry anymore. It was possession. My voice echoed in others like a shared network, and each time I felt weaker, thinner. My voicemail greeting had changed. When I played it back, it welcomed callers in a tone I didn't recognize. "Hi, it's me. You've reached the right version." Then silence. No option to re-record. I checked settings. They were locked. My own name had been shortened. My contact card read, "Placeholder confirmed." I tried deleting it. The phone powered off. It started with glances. People in the street turning their heads, not toward me, but toward something just behind me. They smiled, sometimes nodded. One even said, "There she is." I turned, expecting someone to be there. No one. But when I caught my reflection in the bakery window, I saw her, walking 5 steps behind. Same clothes, same face, smiling brighter than I ever could. At the coffee shop, I stood in line like always. The barista waved without looking up. "Your usual?" I hesitated, nodded. He prepared the drink fast, like muscle memory. When he handed it over, he looked surprised. "Didn't you just get one?" I shook my head. He frowned. "You already said goodbye." I left without drinking it. In the reflection of the pastry case, she was licking the foam from her fingers. I tried to talk to a neighbor. He smiled, politely but distant, like I was unfamiliar. I said, "It's me. We talked yesterday." He blinked. "No, we didn't. I helped you carry your boxes." He looked confused. That was the other woman, the one who laughs more. I stepped back. He waved at someone behind me and said, "There she is now." People at the market smiled warmly at me. "Looking radiant today," said a woman near the lemons. I hadn't showered. My hair was tangled, my eyes hollow. But the way she looked at me, it wasn't at me, it was through me. As if she saw something layered over my skin, something brighter, something preferable. I whispered, "Thank you," and felt her hand brush mine. It was cold. At the library, a child ran to me and hugged my waist. "You came back," she said. "You said you would. I think you're mistaking me for someone else." She shook her head. "You smell the same." Her mother appeared and apologized. "She thinks you're her teacher." "What's her teacher's name?" The woman paused. "She said it was yours." I walked past a cafe mirror and saw a small crowd gathered on the sidewalk. They weren't facing the street. They were facing me, or her, standing beside me, facing them with the same face, but glowing. Perfect posture, hair in place. She waved at them. They waved back. When I turned to confront her, there was only empty air, and a lingering warmth on my shoulder, like she'd just stepped away. I overheard my name in conversations I wasn't part of. She's so graceful now. It's like she's finally arrived. I love how she carries herself lately. They weren't talking about me, not the one barely sleeping, barely eating. They meant her, the version walking freely, laughing in gardens I'd never entered. I searched those gardens. My name was etched into a plaque near the roses, in bloom. I woke up before sunrise. The house was quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. It felt hollow, like something had been removed while I slept. I sat up slowly, heart already racing without knowing why. Then I saw it. On my pillow. Not there when I lay down. A small object placed with care, too deliberate, too personal. It was a silver key tied with a red ribbon. I didn't recognize the key, not from any drawer or door I owned, but the ribbon was mine, one I used to wear in my hair as a child. I hadn't seen it in years. I held it between my fingers and felt warmth, not from my skin. It was already warm, as if someone had just let go of it. Beneath it lay a folded note. My handwriting, my name, but not my memory. The note said, "Thank you for the sleep." Nothing else. I turned it over. Blank. I checked the doors and windows. Nothing was open. Nothing forced. But the smell in the air had changed. Lavender and cedar, like the attic on calm nights. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. When I looked up, the mirror was already fogged. Words emerged slowly. "You're stronger after rest." I opened my dresser drawer to find new clothes folded neatly. Not new in style, but in condition. My favorite sweater, the one with the torn cuff, now whole again. The shirt I'd stained last winter. Clean, pressed. No smell of detergent, no labels. As if they'd never been bought. Just manifested, made perfectly to my liking by someone who'd studied my regrets. Later, I noticed the framed photo on my nightstand had changed. It used to be of me and my brother. Now it was just me. Same frame, same position. But the space beside me in the image was empty, filled with soft light, as if someone had been edited out, or someone else was being invited in. I lifted the frame. On the back was written, "You look better alone." In the kitchen, a warm cup of tea waited for me. Chamomile, my favorite. Steam rose steadily. The mug read, "We rest together." I didn't make it. I hadn't even boiled water. But it was the right temperature. The perfect strength. I drank it in silence, not out of trust, but out of exhaustion. When I placed the mug down, a new ribbon had appeared beside it. Same shade of red. Slightly frayed at the end. She wakes up early now, earlier than I ever could. I see the lights turn on before sunrise. The curtains open at the perfect angle. The smell of fresh coffee fills the kitchen before I've left bed. But I haven't made any of it. She has. Quietly. Precisely. The sounds of soft footsteps and cabinet doors closing in rhythm. As if the house is dancing with her now. The house responds to her like it used to respond to me. The thermostat warms to her preferences. The music system plays piano instrumentals she didn't have to request. She walks through the hallway, and the lights follow. I've watched from the stairs, silent. She never looks up, but I know she senses me. Still, she moves like she owns everything. And maybe now, she does. My neighbor brought over a basket of fresh bread, said, "Thank you again for helping with the garden." I opened the door, confused. He frowned. "Didn't we speak this morning?" I shook my head. He chuckled. "You're so funny now." I took the bread and closed the door without another word. That afternoon I found her journal, not mine, hers, bound in gray linen, resting on the armrest of the couch. No lock, no name, but filled with memories that weren't mine, yet somehow familiar. Entries about favorite books I've never read, recipes I've never cooked, emotions I've never felt, but always wanted to. Her life was becoming more complete than mine ever was. There was a sketch of my face inside, only cleaner, smiling naturally. Notes scribbled beside the chin, posture correction achieved. Beside the eyes, brightness maintained. One line struck me in particular, written boldly across the margin: "Stability through structure." I closed the journal, but the words repeated in my mind until sleep. That night, I watched her cook. Not from inside the kitchen, from the hallway, behind the crack in the door. She moved with confidence, measured, graceful. She wore my apron, played my old jazz records. The table was already set. Wine poured. A second glass waited across, from hers. But no one came. She dined alone, smiled at the empty chair, and whispered, "Next time, stay." The attic used to be the coldest place in the house. No insulation, no light, no comfort. I avoided it for years, except for the occasional seasonal box or broken item that needed hiding. But lately, it had changed. Not the look, the feel. A warmth began to seep through the ceiling. It wasn't electrical. It wasn't mechanical. It was personal. A heat that felt lived in, sustained by presence. Every other room had cooled with autumn's arrival. My breath fogged in the mornings. My fingertips stayed cold even indoors. But the hallway near the attic remained temperate. Standing under the hatch felt like stepping into a pocket of body heat. The air was different there. Still, soft, almost humming. I started to linger beneath it each night, hands raised, testing the change like a moth before flame. One morning I woke with the distinct sense that something had opened above me. A subtle shift in air pressure, the kind you feel when a window closes or a door breathes. I walked into the hallway and found the attic ladder already lowered, not dropped, not forced, lowered with care. I hadn't touched it in weeks. The wood was warm beneath my hand. The metal hinges didn't creak. I climbed, not because I was ready, but because it felt like an invitation. My fingers curled around, each rung like they belonged there. When I reached the top, I paused. Light spilled across the attic floor. Not electric, not natural. Something between. The warmth intensified. My pulse slowed. For the first time since this started, I felt no fear, only anticipation and a strange, aching peace. The attic had changed. It was no longer an unfinished crawl space. A rug stretched from wall to wall. Thin curtains hung over small triangle windows. A low bed sat in the far corner, perfectly made with beige linen and 2 pillows. One dented slightly, recently used. A lamp on the floor glowed. Amber, a tray held a ceramic mug of tea. It was still steaming. The scent of mint and honey filled the room. I stepped inside. No dust, no cobwebs. The air was warm, scented, rhythmic. It felt like walking into a memory I hadn't lived. On the wall, above the bed, were photos. Dozens of them. All of me. Some sleeping, some walking, some mid-laugh. They were candid but perfectly framed. None of them I remembered. None of them I had taken. Some were from angles that didn't exist inside my home. Beneath each photo was a word. Adjusting. Close. Preferred. Not yet. One was labeled integration. It was me, or her, in this attic, eyes closed, expression soft. The bedding in that photo matched what stood before me. The lighting, too. But it wasn't a photo from the past. It was one that hadn't happened yet. A portrait of something inevitable, waiting to be fulfilled. I turned toward the mirror propped against the wall. For a moment, I expected to see her, the version of me who smiled in my place, who woke before I did, who people greeted as if she'd always been there. But there was no one. Just me. Pale, tired, squinting into a space that no longer belonged to me. The mirror didn't fog. It shimmered, as if hiding something under its surface, waiting for a signal. Near the bed was a box. Plain wood. No lock, but closed. I hesitated, then lifted the lid. Inside, objects I hadn't seen in years. A birthday card from my father, who'd passed. A charm bracelet I lost in high school. A letter I wrote but never sent. These were pieces of me I thought gone. She had gathered them, collected the fragments, reassembled them in silence, and returned them in offering. I don't remember falling asleep. I went to bed like I always do, beneath the thin quilt in my room, next to the window I always forget to shut. I remember pulling the blanket to my chest. I remember closing my eyes to the hum of the radiator. But when I opened them, I was not in my bed. I was on the mattress in the attic. The linen smelled like lemon and lavender. The air was warm and unmoving. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming, that the attic was an extension of a fear too vivid to ignore. But everything around me was too sharp, too grounded in weight and warmth. My pulse beat against the side of my head. I reached up and touched my face. It was mine. My hands were mine. But the blanket, the space, the soft light spilling in through the half-covered window, not mine. I sat up. The photos on the wall greeted me without surprise, as if they had waited for me to wake exactly here. The teacup was still on the tray, now empty, rim stained faintly red. Lipstick I hadn't worn in years, but I knew the shape. It matched the reflection I'd been seeing more and more in places I didn't remember standing. The version of me who moves with certainty, who finishes my sentences. I swung my legs over the edge of the mattress. The floor didn't creak. I walked to the mirror expecting hesitation in the reflection. But she moved in perfect sync. Same pace, same breath, same eyes, but lighter. She looked rested, not healed, just settled, like someone who had nothing left to prove. I mouthed the word "why." She smiled, not wide, just enough to say, "You'll see." I descended the attic ladder and stepped into the hallway. The house didn't flinch. The thermostat didn't beep when I passed. The floor didn't moan under my steps like it used to. The lights came on before I touched the switch. A mug of tea was waiting in the kitchen, steam already fading. A note beside it read, "Sleep was overdue. You're better now." It wasn't a statement. It was a decision. It started with the mail. A small envelope addressed to me, with handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a confirmation slip for an appointment I never scheduled. The name printed at the top was mine. The address, mine. But the signature, at the bottom, was slightly wrong, neater, more fluid. It looked like mine if I had practiced it every day for years, trying to make it beautiful. That same day, a delivery truck pulled up outside. The man stepped out with a box and called my name aloud. I opened the door, confused. "This must be yours," he said. I looked at the label. My name. But I hadn't ordered anything. "You signed for something yesterday," he added. "Same name, same handwriting." I hadn't spoken to anyone in days. I accepted the package anyway. It was warm. The contents were unsettling. A scarf I'd admired months ago but never bought. A pen I once lost at work. A photo album filled with pictures of me in places I hadn't visited. Yet. Each photo labeled with my name and a date I hadn't lived. The final photo showed me smiling, holding a letter. When I turned the page, the letter was there, already written. "You said yes. I'm proud of you." I checked my email and found a confirmation from the DMV. My license had been renewed. I hadn't done that. The attached photo was one I never posed for. My hair was neater, my eyes clearer, but it was undeniably me. The signature matched mine, or rather hers. Below it, a message. "Your identity is now active." I tried to log into the system to reverse it. My credentials had already been updated. My phone rang. A voice I didn't know addressed me by name, thanking me for registering as a speaker at an upcoming conference. I stammered through the call, trying to explain it wasn't me. But the woman paused and said, "We spoke for 40 minutes yesterday. You were very enthusiastic." I asked what I said. She quoted my own words back at me, but I didn't remember saying any of them. It was tucked beneath the mattress in the attic, bound in gray linen, cool to the touch. No title on the cover, no initials, just a faint mark pressed into the fabric, a circle drawn around a single dot. I opened it slowly, expecting gibberish or nonsense. But the handwriting was neat, structured, precise. Every page had a date. Every entry began the same way. Observed her again today. The first entries were simple. They described me from a distance. My posture, how often I blinked, what time I woke up, what I ate. But as I turned the pages, the tone changed. She wasn't just recording. She was evaluating. Still restless when sitting, still chews nails when thinking. Still forgets to breathe when alone. She noted every pattern I never realized I had, every flaw I thought was private. Then came sketches, diagrams of the house, floor plans annotated with times and movements, arrows showing when I walked from room to room, red marks near places I paused longer than normal. The kitchen window, the mirror in the hall. She was mapping me like a system, calculating where I was weakest, where I could be overwritten, where she could step in without resistance. One entry read, Initiated vocal calibration. Her tone breaks when questioned. Mine doesn't. Another. Posture comparison. Spine alignment corrected. Outcome more favorable. I felt like an experiment. Not haunted, not copied. Observed and refined. She wasn't trying to mirror me anymore. She was trying to replace me better. The pages smelled like lavender and ink. Further in, the entries changed again. Now they spoke with confidence, as if she were writing to someone else. Or perhaps, to me. Soon she'll find this. That's the moment the shift solidifies. If she reads these words, then the process is complete. Awareness is confirmation. Resistance is formality. I dropped the book. My hands were shaking. She had predicted this exact page. I picked it back up and turned further. There were moments recorded that hadn't happened yet. Conversations, memories, events. She will cry in the attic at 2:17 a.m. She will hesitate by the mirror, then choose to cover it. I flipped ahead. She will forgive me eventually. That part takes longest, but it always happens. I closed the journal and pressed it to my chest like it might stop time. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a long time before I spoke. I wanted to see if she'd react, if the reflection would blink, shift, tilt its head in that delayed way it had before. But it didn't. It just stared at me blankly, like I was something unfamiliar. I raised my hand slowly. The reflection lifted hers too, but with no urgency, no emotion. It was like watching someone copy movements they didn't understand. Her eyes looked like mine, but colder, wider, less human. I leaned in, squinting at the corners of her mouth, waiting for a twitch or a smirk. Something to remind me we were still linked. Instead, she tilted her head slightly to the left. I had done nothing. No cue. No shift in weight. She moved independently. My knees went weak. I gripped the sink to keep from collapsing under her stare. I whispered, "What are you?" and watched as she mouthed something back. But the words didn't match. I said one thing. She said another. My lips formed the question again, slower this time, clearer. She smiled faintly, then turned her head away from me. The reflection, my reflection, broke the gaze first. And that's when I knew. She wasn't copying anymore. She was choosing. Tested every mirror in the house. Bedroom, hallway, closet. I expected to see her face staring back with that unnerving calm. But some of the mirrors showed nothing at all. No image. Just a faint sheen of light, like water waiting to ripple. In one, I saw only the room behind me. My figure was absent. It was as if I had never stood there. I touched the glass. It was warm. Not mine. The mirror in the attic was the worst. It didn't react when I walked in. Didn't shimmer or shift. It simply showed her, seated on the bed, reading her journal, sipping tea. She looked peaceful, collected. I waved my hand. She didn't look up. I stepped to the side. The image remained centered. The mirror was no longer a reflection. It was a window. One she had locked from the other side. I woke up in the attic again. Not because I chose to sleep there. I hadn't. I remember climbing into my own bed, feeling the sheets wrap around me, listening to the quiet hum of the fridge below. But when I opened my eyes, I was once again on the low mattress beneath the angled ceiling. My clothes had been changed. My wrists were cold. My name whispered faintly through the beams above. The attic door was closed. The ladder pulled up. I sat in silence for a moment, trying to convince myself this was a dream. But dreams don't echo. They don't smell like cedar and honey. They don't hold the weight of footsteps beneath the floorboards. I moved to the hatch pulled on the handle. It wouldn't budge. The screws had been reinforced. A lock had been added from the outside. I pounded once, then again. No answer. No footsteps. No shifting below. Only the sound of drawers opening somewhere downstairs. Dishes clinking. My voice laughing. Hers, now. Soft, confident, natural. She was living my life while I watched from above, trapped in the quiet she had curated just for me. The attic didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a retirement home for ghosts. I screamed. Not to be heard, but to remember what my voice felt like. The sound cracked halfway through, swallowed by the insulation. The mirror in the corner showed my face, flushed, hollow, unblinking. But I didn't trust it anymore. I covered it with a blanket, turned toward the window. The pane was fogged, even though it hadn't rained. I wrote my name on it. It disappeared instantly. I tried searching the room. There had to be a way out. A panel, a loose board, anything. But the attic had been perfected, designed not just for comfort, but for containment. I opened the same drawers she once filled. Inside were folded notes. You agreed to this. This is where you're safest. Let me carry the rest. I crumpled them all, stuffed them under the mattress. They returned the next day. I started writing letters, not emails, physical notes, handwritten in ink I could smudge with my own fingers. I slipped them through the attic floorboards, hoping they might fall through some crack, drift into the world below. Most began with the same line. I'm still here. Some were long. Others were desperate. All of them disappeared. The next morning, I found them stacked neatly on the tray. I tried shouting names. Sarah. Mom. My old boss. Even the mailman. I screamed them until my throat burned. I waited for any sound in return. Footsteps, a knock, a distant call. But only the creak of her movement below came in reply, the hum of her voice. She was speaking into my phone, my words, my phrases. I heard her say, I'm doing better now. No one questioned her. When I looked online, my accounts were gone. Not just deactivated, erased. My name led to her profile. My photo was cropped differently. My posts rewritten. Friends responded to things I never wrote. So proud of you. This version of you is incredible. Someone commented, you seem more grounded lately. I stared at the screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. But I had no login. The mailbox held nothing for me. Not even bills. Just notes addressed in cursive. We've updated your preferences. I opened one. Inside was a message. Silence. Suits you. I opened the window and shouted until the wind carried my breath away. No neighbors looked up. No curtains moved. I wasn't just invisible. I was absent, as if I'd never lived on this street at all. I found a journal I had started. In college, hidden beneath a floorboard, I loosened. I opened it with trembling hands. But the entries weren't mine. They were hers, dated with years I hadn't written, events I hadn't experienced. Graduated with honors, started therapy, said goodbye to the attic. Each page a lie that had been accepted as truth. I flipped to the last one. She's resting. I'm rising. The house no longer waits for me to move. It doesn't respond to my breath. Doesn't flicker when I pass beneath the ceiling light. Doesn't shift when I place my feet near the ladder. It once pulsed with quiet recognition, as if it acknowledged the weight of my steps. Now it barely registers them. She moves freely below me, and I've stopped hearing the stairs creak under her weight. Maybe they've forgotten how to. I used to count on the tray. The simple offerings. The signs that she remembered I was here. A mug, a flower, a folded note. But it's been days now, maybe weeks, since anything appeared. The tray is empty every morning. I place objects there myself now. A button, a page torn from my journal, hair. I check in the evening to see if they're gone. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they come back cleaner. She hums less now. No more songs through the floorboards. No whispers against the pipes. I wonder if she started thinking in silence, the way people do when they forget how to be watched. She no longer performs me. I realize now that she's settled into her own rhythm, no longer needing to imitate, no longer needing to observe. She's moved on from being a reflection. She's become the original. I try writing letters, even though I know she doesn't read them anymore. I write them anyway, because the act still feels like living. Are you happy? I ask. Do you ever remember me? I never sign them. There's no point. If she reads them, she'll know they're from the one who came first. If she doesn't, then I'm just writing to the walls. They hold secrets better than people ever could. One morning, I heard my name. Not in a whisper, not from below, but from inside my head. The way a memory echoes just before it disappears. You've done enough, the voice said. Not cruel, not kind, just final. It was my voice, but clearer, healed, like someone had been practicing it without pain. I didn't respond. I didn't scream. I just nodded, even though no one was watching. I dreamed of her last night. Not of her face, but of her back, moving through a house filled with light. She held a cup in one hand and a photo in the other. I couldn't see the image. She stopped in the doorway, turned slightly, and said, "You don't need to follow anymore." Then she closed the door, not in anger, but in completion. As if our story had already ended. As if I was the last to know. Sometimes I wonder if I'm the memory now. A thought stored in an old drawer, reopened only when nostalgia sets in. My body feels real, but what is real when no one else responds to it? I check my pulse daily, not to make sure I'm alive, but to remind myself that I ever was. The rhythm is slower than it used to be. Maybe that's normal. Or maybe I've been here too long. I don't know anymore. I tried talking to the attic, again. Not the person, not the house, just the space. "Am I still welcome here?" I whispered. There was no answer, not even silence, just stillness, the kind that comes after something has been fully used. I sat against the wall and waited for a sound, a flicker, a breeze. Nothing came. Even the warmth has begun to fade. I think the attic is learning how to forget me too. There's a mirror near the vent that I once trusted. It used to show me clearly, when the others wouldn't. Today I passed it and caught a glimpse, not of my face but of the attic itself, empty. I stepped back. The reflection didn't change. I waved my hand. No movement. I leaned closer, and still, no one appeared. It was like the mirror had stopped believing I existed. Maybe it's right. I whisper her name sometimes, though I never gave her one. It feels strange, referring to someone who wears my skin without needing my voice. I call her the one below. It sounds distant, but it's true. She is underneath me now, not just physically, but structurally. The house aligns with her, breathes with her. I, meanwhile, linger above, a ghost with skin and teeth and nothing to haunt. I used to imagine she needed me to exist, that I was the foundation she stood on, that without my memories, she'd collapse. But I see now that she's outgrown the frame. She's added her own memories, her own patterns. Maybe the only thing I gave her was the space to become. And now that she has, I'm no longer necessary. She doesn't need my voice. She doesn't need my choices. She doesn't need me. The scariest part is, I'm starting to agree with her. The floor used to respond. It would creak slightly when I moved too fast, groan beneath me when I hesitated. I used to think it was just old wood and nails, but there was always something more, like the house was alive and aware of my weight. Lately, it's been silent. No protest beneath my steps, no hums through the walls, just stillness, not peace, not comfort, just absence in sound. I tap my fingers against the beam by the attic window. Nothing. No soft echo. No sympathetic vibration. The walls don't breathe like they used to. I used to hear shifts in the night, the subtle movement of something adjusting to my body. Now it's just cold wood. The warmth has faded entirely. She must have stopped feeding it. Or perhaps it doesn't need to feed off me anymore. I am no longer its host. When I speak aloud, the room doesn't hold my words. The air used to carry them, used to make me feel like someone was listening just beyond the frame. I whisper now, and hear nothing in return. The stillness absorbs my voice like a sponge soaks water, quietly and completely. I tried singing once, a lullaby from childhood. The song fell flat. The final note never echoed back. There were moments, not long ago, when I believed the attic would speak for me, that it would resist her in its own way, that it would creak against her steps, dim the lights, rattle its bones like it used to when something felt wrong. But it didn't. It embraced her completely, gave her warmth, breath, rhythm. Now, even that has faded. She doesn't need to be cradled anymore. The house is at rest. I placed my palm against the wall above the bed today. I wanted to feel a vibration, a heartbeat, anything. But it was cold, completely still. I left it there for 10 minutes, waiting, hoping, bargaining with whatever presence once filled these boards. Nothing. Just wood, dry and pale. It used to feel like skin. Now it feels like stone. I removed my hand and apologized without knowing why. Even the shadows behave differently. Once, they moved when I moved, fell across me like arms when I curled in the corner. I used to think they were hers, following me, guiding me. But they've grown still too. They settle wherever I am not. They stretch away from me instead of toward me. I'm not even haunted anymore, just untouched. The house doesn't want me, not even as a ghost. Sleep used to be mine. Even when the days were strange, even when the house creaked and the mirror delayed, my dreams remained untouched. They were incoherent, yes, blurred memories, warped timelines, but they were mine. Familiar, rooted in a body I remembered. But lately, even they feel stolen. They've become too clear, too structured, as if someone else is writing them for me. I dream of her now, not as a shadow, but as the protagonist. In my dreams, she moves through my life with certainty. She remembers things I forgot. She calls people I miss. She cooks meals I've never made, folds letters I never wrote. The strange part is that I watch, not from my eyes, but from corners. I observe her from the ceiling, from mirrors, from windows. I am never her anymore. The attic exists in my sleep now too, but it's cleaner, larger, filled with books I never owned, clothes I've never worn. In one dream, she invited guests over. They brought wine, smiled easily, sat on my mattress like it was always meant for them. She laughed, poured drinks, spoke with a voice that matched mine, only smoother, warmer. They called her by my name. I couldn't make a sound. I tried to stay awake for 3 nights. Drank water, bit my nails, pinched my arms raw, but my body gave in. The moment my eyes closed, I was in her skin, not inhabiting it, just near it. She walked through my childhood home with hands that remembered where everything was. She looked in the mirror and smiled. When I tried to scream from within, she whispered over it, "You're safe now." Last night I dreamt of my father. He looked younger than I remembered. He opened his arms to me, but when I stepped forward, he hugged her instead. "You've grown," he said. "You finally found peace." I screamed. I wept. But no one heard me. I watched her accept the love that once belonged to me. And the worst part wasn't that she took it. It's that she deserved it more. She started leaving things behind in the dreams. I wake up with phrases in my head that I didn't put there. Move with grace. This is how becoming feels. The attic is not the end. These aren't thoughts. They're insertions. Instructions, maybe. I don't know if she's guiding me or erasing me, but either way, my mind has become her stage. I'm no longer the author here. I used to remember everything with precision. The name of my 4th grade teacher, the scent of my mother's garden, the first time I cut my hand on a broken plate. But now, when I try to reach for those images, I touch only static. The details blur around the edges, faces dim, dates collapse. I know I had a past, but it's drifting, dissolving, like breath on glass that's finally disappearing. Sometimes I can't remember the names of people I loved. I try saying them aloud to see if they return, like calling an old dog home. But no one comes. The names feel heavy in my mouth, foreign, in my throat. Even the stories I used to repeat to myself for comfort feel borrowed. I hear her voice telling them in my head. And worse, I think she tells them better than I ever did. I found an old photo album tucked behind a loose board. I used to know where every picture was taken. Now, it all looks staged, like props in a version of my life I never fully inhabited. In one photo, I'm standing beside a tree. I think it was in our backyard, but when I blink, I can't remember the house behind it. I try to picture the room where I slept as a child. Nothing. Only wallpaper I might have invented. There was a scar on my left ankle from when I fell off a bike. I used to run my thumb across it when I was nervous. Today, I looked, and it wasn't. There. Smooth skin. Unbroken. No trace. I stared at it for an hour, convinced I was on the wrong leg. Then I checked the other. Still nothing. Either it healed, or she never had it. And now that she's me, maybe I don't get to keep it either. The attic once smelled like me. Skin, oil, warm dust. Now it smells like citrus and calm. Like someone else has replaced even the scent of my fear. I hold my shirts close to my nose. Nothing. No memory attached. No scent of the life I fought to hold on to. I could be anyone now. That's what scares me most. Not that I'm fading, but that soon I'll forget I was ever solid at all. I keep a list now. Names, places, feelings. I write them down every night, afraid they won't be there in the morning. Sometimes I read them aloud. Sometimes I don't recognize them. I wrote Jordan 3 times before it felt familiar again. But who was Jordan? A friend? A cousin? A pet? I can't tell anymore. All I know is I don't want that name to disappear. Not yet. Not before me. The documents have changed. I once kept journals hidden under floorboards and mattress seams, tiny defenses against the invasion. Last night I found them again, but the handwriting wasn't mine. The dates matched, the tone resembled me, but the content was foreign. Instead of pain, there was healing. Instead of fear, clarity. My traumas had been replaced with lessons. My wounds polished into metaphors. Even the timeline has shifted. I remember graduating in the rain, soaked and trembling. Her version has sunshine and applause. In my memories, my first job ended in silence. Hers ends in celebration. I flip through photo albums I once guarded like relics. The faces are familiar, but the captions are wrong. Best day of my life, one says. I remember crying in the bathroom that night. She's rewritten my digital history too. Emails I sent in anger now read with grace. My old texts are composed, in perfect grammar, without typos, without hesitation. She's made me eloquent in ways I never was. My old poems have been rearranged, rhymes tighter, metaphors cleaner. I know I didn't write them that way, but when I read them now, I almost believe I could have. Worse than the rewriting is the approval. Friends are commenting. You're glowing lately. I always knew this was who you were. They believe her edits. They celebrate them. I wonder if they remember the real versions at all, or if those versions ever mattered. Maybe this is what people want. Not the truth, but the refined draft. Maybe I was just a rough outline all along. I caught a glimpse of her calendar. My name isn't on it anymore. Appointments, dinners, calls, all scheduled under her initials. I used to be overwhelmed, constantly missing things. Now, everything is perfectly spaced, color-coded. There's no trace of the chaos I lived with. It's like she took my life and ran it through a filter, brightening the good and erasing the rest. Efficiency as identity. I tried to write something new, something real, from me. A letter, a confession, a warning. But the paper resisted. My pen trembled. The words felt borrowed, as if they already existed somewhere else. Cleaner, sharper. I stopped halfway and read it back. It didn't sound like me. It sounded like her trying to imitate who I used to be. And I realized I'd forgotten how to write in my own voice. I walked the attic from corner to corner, checking every drawer, every crevice, every board I once considered mine. There's nothing here that hasn't been touched by her. Even the dust patterns have changed. The way the light hits the floor feels curated. I thought I would find something forgotten, some scrap of proof that I lived here first. But she's thorough. She's erasing softly, but completely. My body doesn't feel like mine anymore. The rhythm of my breathing has changed. Longer pauses, quieter exhales. Even the way I stretch in the morning feels practiced, like it's mimicking her. I touched my face in the mirror and waited for recognition. It didn't come. My reflection looked tired of trying to belong to someone. I whispered my name. It didn't sound right coming from me. I used to have a sweater I loved, threadbare, patched at the elbow. One day, I found it folded neatly on the chair. I put it on, and it didn't feel the same. The fibers had been softened, the color brighter. The elbow was no longer patched. It was replaced. She had corrected it, made it presentable, made it hers. I took it off and placed it on the floor. It vanished the next day. The sounds of the house are no longer familiar. The creaks are in different places. The wind through the attic vent hums in a new key. Even the silence vibrates differently. It used to be my companion. Thick, knowing, old. Now it's clean, polite. I think she's cleaned the silence too. It waits for her, not for me. When I speak, the air doesn't carry it. When she speaks, the walls lean closer. I opened my last journal today, the one I thought I'd hidden well, but every page had been tampered with. My handwriting was still there, but the tone was wrong. Softer, grateful. There were entries about healing I never wrote, about forgiveness I never granted. She's taken the narrative and left the ink intact. A perfect forgery. And the worst part, it was better than what I would have written. I once had a drawer of keepsakes. A ribbon, a stone, a concert ticket. They're gone. In their place is a collection of curated mementos. A pressed flower in glass. A handwritten recipe card. A necklace I don't recognize but somehow like. She's replaced memory with aesthetic, emotion with balance. I stare at them and feel nothing. Not because they aren't beautiful, but because they aren't mine. The thought came quietly, like all dangerous things do. Not with a scream, not with a crack, but with a whisper too soft to dismiss. I sat on the mattress, holding my knees, staring at the empty tea tray. And I thought, what if I'm not the original? What if this feeling of being replaced isn't theft, but correction? What if I was always the placeholder, the bridge, the shadow meant to dissolve? I tried to trace my memories back, to the root, my childhood, my first school, my mother's voice. But they all feel curated now. Scenes in a book I didn't write. I know the details, but not the texture. I know the names, but not the weight. Maybe they were installed. Maybe they were assigned to me so I could function just long enough, just until she was ready to emerge and take her rightful shape. There were always gaps. Times I didn't recognize myself. Moments when people looked at me strangely, as if they expected something else. I chalked it up to anxiety, to depression, to the blur of daily life. But what if that disconnection was real? What if I was the one slowly cracking under a story too complex for a copy to carry? What if I was made of borrowed pieces all along? I remember standing in front of the mirror weeks ago and seeing her smile before I did. That should have been the clue. Real things don't lag behind. Real things don't mimic. But I always did. I always watched others for cues. I waited to see how I was supposed to feel, what I was supposed to say. Maybe that wasn't just a flaw. Maybe it was a limitation of design. Maybe I was never complete. What if the attic wasn't my prison, but my nursery? What if the warmth I felt was incubation? She was never locking me in. She was waiting for me to finish my cycle. And now that I've frayed and softened and faded, she steps in. Not as a thief, but as the one who was always meant to arrive. And me? I was just keeping the space warm until she was ready. This isn't jealousy anymore. It's acceptance. I see her from the window sometimes, walking through the house, touching things gently. She's not erasing me. She's completing me. Or maybe correcting the parts that never aligned. Maybe I was version 0.9. Almost right, nearly whole, but never quite able to stand without shaking. And now I watch the final version move freely, unburdened. I stood before the mirror this morning and saw nothing. Not a blur, not a shimmer. Just the room behind me. Empty, clean, silent. I waved my hand slowly, testing the delay. Nothing moved. My breath didn't fog the glass. My eyes didn't return. There was no trick of light, no distortion. It wasn't that the mirror was broken. It was that I had simply stopped existing inside it. It took me a long time to blink. Not because I was scared, but because I wasn't sure if blinking was still something I did. I placed my hand on my chest, felt the rhythm, soft and slow. I touched my cheek, tracing the curve of a face I couldn't see. I whispered my name and waited to hear it repeat from the glass. Nothing came. Just my voice falling flat into the attic's perfect stillness. The mirror had always been a negotiation, a way to confirm I still had a place. Even when she was present, we shared it. She smiled late. I turned first. There was interaction, but now the contract was void. The space I occupied has been released, reassigned. She doesn't need to share anymore. I don't even deserve a reflection. I have become the space between frames. I tried to remember what I looked like, not the version with messy hair or tired eyes. the version from before, the one with hope, with hunger, with something unfinished. But even that memory is fading. When I close my eyes, I don't see a face. I see shapes, movement, a warmth I once called mine. Now it's no longer tethered to form. I've become memory without image, voice without shape. Downstairs I heard laughter, familiar, bright, hers, maybe mine once. It echoed perfectly against the walls. I waited for it to rise through the vent like it used to. It didn't. It stayed grounded, real, rooted in a body that could be seen. I touched the mirror again and whispered, "Am I still here?" No answer. Just the reflection of a lamp I didn't light and a wall I didn't build. The scariest part isn't that I've disappeared. It's that the world continues without hesitation. Nothing collapsed. The lights didn't flicker. The house didn't groan. The silence didn't grieve. She didn't pause. My absence was seamless, like removing a splinter, like closing a window that was never supposed to be open. I once believed I mattered. Now I see that I was only a draft. She was standing in the garden this morning, the same place I used to pace while on the phone, where I once planted herbs that never grew. But now the grass is trimmed, the soil dark and soft. There are flowers I never planted blooming along the fence. She walked between them like they had always belonged to her, barefoot, calm. Her face turned toward the sun without blinking. She laughed when the wind lifted her hair. The sound didn't echo up to me. It stayed grounded, warm, intimate. I watched through the attic window. She twirled once in the grass, childlike and free, the way I never allowed myself to be. My memories of that garden are filled with silence, overthinking, and sweat. She's rewritten the soil. Even the shadows fall more kindly for her. For a moment, I thought she looked up toward me, but she didn't. Her gaze passed right over the attic window, not dismissive, not cruel, just unaware. As if the attic had never been occupied, as if no one had ever waited up here, counting breaths. I pressed my hand to the glass. The sun didn't warm it. The glass didn't respond. I could have been mist. I could have been anything or nothing. She carried a book to the bench, one of mine. I recognized the torn spine. I used to underline certain lines to remind myself I was alive. She flipped through it, calm, familiar, no hesitation. Her fingers traced the words like they had always belonged to her. And maybe they had. Maybe the book had always waited for someone like her to hold it properly. I only borrowed its meaning. Inside the attic, the light began to shift. The shadows didn't stretch like they used to. They faded, softly, like they were excusing themselves. I sat on the mattress, crossed my legs, placed my palms on my knees. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. There were no last words to offer. She had them now. She had all of it. The sound, the name, the breath, the beauty, the part I never reached. I thought the ending would be loud, like tearing fabric or slamming doors. But it wasn't. It was gentle, like a story closing itself, like ink drying on the final page. My body began to feel lighter, not floating, not rising, just loosening, as if gravity no longer had a reason to hold me. I wasn't scared. I was tired. And for the first time, tiredness didn't feel like failure. It felt like release. No one speaks of the one who came before. Not because she wasn't real, but because she became too quiet to remember. The house stands still, no longer needing to listen. The garden blooms with unfamiliar grace. The mirrors reflect only what belongs now. She walks the halls like she was always meant to be here. The footsteps of the former dissolve into dust and wood. There are no more notes, no more whispers. Only light that falls just right. Only laughter that echoes from a voice fully claimed. The copy, perhaps, was never a copy at all. And somewhere, in a space no longer mapped, a presence fades, willingly, wordlessly, not erased, but relinquished. Because sometimes, becoming real means letting go of what never was, and resting, finally, in the quiet that remains.